So this video is it's a little rushed, honestly, because I have to do all the stuff for this little project in like 3 days. I was tasked by my mother to make something for my dad for Christmas. She had gone and gotten him a gift card for Menards because he's been going there a lot and doing a lot of like farming stuff in the backyard. He's got his little garden set up and all that. And she said to go and buy or 3D print one of the raised garden beds. You know, the metal like tub looking ones. So I scoured a lot of different sites. Thingiverse, My Mini Factory, a few other like Maker's Market and stuff. And finally on Cults 3D, I found some that I could 3D print. I could have, bought the kids, like the kid ranch sets with them in there. But no, I found some that I can 3D print. But I went for ones that I 3D printed it with technically raised beds. So like there's dirt in here already. And I didn't just print one. I could have and called it good, painted it, called it good. Nah, I'm a jackass. So within 3 days, I have to finish not one, not two, but 3 of the raised beds, 2 small planters that I did, that I printed, and using stuff from, what was it? I think it's Cast and Play. I printed off a figure of a farmer that I need to also paint. Plus, I have a board. So yeah, there's a lot to do. So let's get to it.
I think there's a few things I kind of did wrong in this. Because, I was rushing and wanted to get it done within 5 or 6 days. And I still don't have like a full, really good grasp on diorama building. It's a skill I want to improve on in 2016. So there may be a few problems. And you can go ahead and point them out in the comments. But let's go day by day and see if I can get this done in 5 or 6 days. That afternoon, once I got home from work, I put the files I got from Cults into my Elegant Jupiter and just let it go. The prints took about 1.5 to 2 hours to print, and one of the prints actually completely failed. It was one of like the fully open beds that I mentioned in the intro, without the dirt in it. It also took me a little bit to, clean them off, cure them, all that. So I would say altogether I put in, 2.5 to 3 hours of work on it that day. Day 2 and 3, Saturday and Sunday, the 20th and 21st, both those days I was concentrating on other projects, so I didn't actually work on this project, even though I probably should have. Day 4, Monday, December 22nd, I finally did some work on the project. I mixed up a batch of watered down Mod Podge and grabbed my cooked soil. I started with the raised beds. Where I was going to put the dirt, I covered that with the Mod Podge mixture and then just dunked it in the soil. This didn't do super well because I dunked it in upside down. So then I just grabbed some of the dirt and sprinkled it over the top of the Mod Podge, and that worked better. I did the same thing with the rest of the raised beds and with the flower pots. Then, just to make sure everything got locked in there, I put another layer of watered down Mod Podge onto those models and then added in a isopropyl alcohol to it to break the surface tension and help lock everything in. Once I completed all the models, I grabbed the baseboard that I'd be using and some sandpaper, and I broke all of the edges and corners on it. Breaking the edges, I think, is a woodworking term that I learned, where you make it so the edge isn't a sharp corner anymore. So then you're less likely to get splinters or hurt yourself on the corners and edges. You see it on like a lot of furniture where the edge is kind of rounded. Once all of that was sanded, I then plopped some Mod Podge onto it. Not the watered down that I was using, just regular Mod Podge. And I spread that around, making sure to cover the whole top of the board with it. I wanted to keep it a bit thin, but not like too thin, which may have been to my downfall. Then I started to cover the board with soil, spreading it out so that it would create, the same idea, a decently thin layer of soil on top of the board. Once I had all of that spread out, I then took my watered down Mod Podge, and I may have gone a little bit overboard with it to try and get stuff locked down. Instead of using a pipette, I decided, I'm just going to take the glass that it's in, and I'm going to kind of scoop it out and pour it onto the thing. It went a little overboard. It went off the side and just kind of, it may have spread out a little more than I wanted it to. Then I kind of just picked the thing up and I just, tilted it around to try and get all of the coverage on there that I needed. Once I got it all spread out and I cleaned up the desk where it all had overrun, I grabbed the isopropyl spray bottle and a pipette and used both of those to break the surface tension of the watered down Mod Podge. And I just let it all soak in and dry for about a day. And before we continue to day 5, I just want to say, if you're enjoying the video, please hit that like button and subscribe to see what other dumb stuff I get up to this year. I cleaned up some supports. I missed on the farmer miniature with my hobby knife, and then I primed everything black with Army Painter's matte black airbrush primer. I probably should have started painting some of the models at this point, but I didn't because I'm a dumb and I got distracted, I think. Or I don't think I had enough room on my cameras and I had to clear it, and I just said, I'm done for the day. On to day 6. So I tried to do everything else on this last day because I wanted to get it done, by Christmas Eve. So after getting home from a family get-together, I started to paint. First, I started with dry brushing all of the dirt areas with flat brown from Vallejo. Once I finished with all of that, I grabbed some cold steel from P3 and painted all of the raised beds. All I really planned on doing for all of the models is a base coat because of the time constraint. Each of these did take a while because of the texture of the raised beds, along with the bit of screw up on the prints. Because there were some areas that I don't think they printed quite right, but I didn't want to do them again. And if I had used a bigger brush, it probably would have saved me a bit of time for going in between the things on the planters. But I just used a number 2 brush and started inside the cracks, like in the deeper recesses, and then went to the outsides. After that, I did the small planters. For these, I grabbed some flat red and clean orange from Vallejo and kind of wet blended them together and went and did a double coat of these because I didn't like the way that it was covering with the first coat. Once I finished those 2 small planters, I grabbed my super glue and put some glue on my palette, and then rubbed the bottom of those planters in the glue and tried to press them into the dirt and, kind of hope they would stick. This first time, though, they did not. I think it was because of the dirt that was under them. They just weren't sticking super well. So I cleaned off the glue on them and on the base, and then tried scraping up the dirt a little bit to try and just, clean up the area so it was a bit flatter underneath them, so they would actually sit mostly flat. And it's kind of the same with the raised planters. They weren't sitting fully flat, so I grabbed my hobby knife and some sandpaper to try and smooth out the dirt and kind of rip up a little bit of it to get them just sitting flat. Once I thought I had it flat enough in those areas, I took my super glue and tried to glue all of them down again, both the raised beds and the planters. And again, it didn't work out. So I just grabbed some Mod Podge and spread it around the bottom of the raised beds with a cheap brush, hoping that would do the job this time. And by the time I was done with painting all of the raised beds and the planters and trying to get them glued down, it was about 12 a.m. on December 25th. It may have been after that. I do not remember. So I decided it was time to crash for the night and finish up on day 7, Christmas Day. So normally for Christmas Day, it's a holiday, so you should do a good breakfast. That day we were doing French toast, and so while breakfast was being prepared, I went and I worked on this to try and get it done. The last thing I needed to paint was my farmer miniature. And because I'm an idiot, I decided to use one of the hardest colors to paint on it. Fucking yellow. I'm a moron. But to start, I started with the undershirt, which I grabbed dark green from Vallejo's Game Color line for. That, fairly easy paint job. Then I grabbed the lemon yellow from Vallejo's model color line and painted his shirt and the pieces of corn in his bag and in his hand. I didn't fully complete the shirt because I missed a few areas, but I'm coming back for a second round to do that later. Once I'm done with that, I grabbed flat brown for the satchel, bag, boots, rake shaft, belt, and his hair. So a lot of it was brown, but with a lot of pops of color on all the other parts. I tried my best to be careful with the brown so that it didn't get on a lot of the already painted yellow areas and onto the skin areas to make, kind of a weird look when I do come back for the skin. And at this point, I noticed the shirt is underneath his belt and bag, so I grabbed yellow again and I painted that area. Then to finish up, the base coats of it, I grabbed ultramarine blue from Vallejo's Game Color line and I painted his pants. That's when I went and decided to put another coat of yellow onto all of the shirt just for better coverage and to, make it so it's actually looking yellow and not dirty black yellowish, because you could honestly see the black through that yellow for the first coat. So doing a second coat really helped it out. Then I started on the skin. And I'm not going for super realistic because God knows I'm not good enough to do that. And I did not have enough time to go and try and, do different lighting and mixing colors and stuff. So I just did a base coat on everything with just one color, and that color was Rin Flesh from P3 Paints. I did 2 coats of that, and I called it good. Like I said, no highlights, nothing extra, just 2 coats of Rin Flesh base, and that's it. It's the same thing I did for all of the other clothing. And once I was done with the skin, I grabbed some Eosin Green from P3, and I painted all of the leaves on the ears of corn, so that they were, a lighter green than the shirt. For finishing touches, basically the last couple of things, I used Cold Steel from P3 to paint the handle and forks of the rake, and then I grabbed the flat brown again and painted the farmer's beard and used some black from Vallejo's Game Color line to give him just dots for pupils, because I don't want you looking really closely at this, because it does not look good if you are, looking super close. Don't really inspect the miniature. Just, it was a quick paint job. And now I just have to glue him down to the base, which, honestly, like the other stuff, it's easier said than done. I glued him where I wanted him, a first position, and I left him there to dry while I went and had breakfast. Needless to say, he didn't stay. So I tried again, and since super glue didn't work, I tried some watered down Mod Podge that I had mixed up for the day. This time, at least, I thought it would work out for a bit, and it felt like it was. So I moved on to like the actual finishing touches of the whole project. I used a pipette to dot around some of the watered down Mod Podge that I'd made just on the base, and then I used a cheap brush to spread it around and make it, just make it cover more of an area. Then I grabbed my basing materials. I used a combination of earth blend and green blend this time to make it, give it a little bit of variety of color. First, I used the earth blend as a kind of like undertone, and then I layered the green blend on top of it. I did this around 3 sides of the base, and then went to tap off the excess. And as I'm doing that, the miniature fell off. Fuck me. It did not want to stay. And since it won't stay, I decided to just do the rest of the basing without it on there. And then I did more of the same as like I just did. Mod Podge, earth blend, and green blend around the center of the base. But I wanted to keep the center open so I could just place the gift card on there like it is an open spot for farming. And then I make the mistake of trying to glue the farmer miniature back in, but with regular Mod Podge this time. Again, it doesn't work. Then I decided, I wanted to pick up the diorama and kind of move it a little bit to go and knock off the excess foliage stuff. And I grabbed one of the raised beds, which apparently the Mod Podge I used there wasn't dried. Or like the basing under it was too uneven because of all the dirt for it to make like a really good connection there and actually glue to it really well. So I tried re-gluing that down, and I tested the other ones to see if they would move also. And I just decided to add a little bit of glue around the edges to try and get them to, lock in and stay there. And while I tried gluing those down, I just covered the center area with some Mod Podge, some of the watered down Mod Podge, and I grabbed my green blend and just spread a bit more to cover that center of the glued area with the glue. Once I got that done and another repositioning of the farmer mini, I grabbed some tufts and super glue and started to fill in the planters with just, a sparing amount of stuff. I put 2 tufts in one planter before covering the rest of it with watered down Mod Podge and green blend, and I was using mostly lowland shrubs and meadow flower turf tufts. I tried to use them sparingly to just add a little bit of color and variety to the diorama because I was not going to try and, hand make flowers and things, and I didn't have a lot of time to make stuff like that. And I'm going to be honest with you, after I finished recording everything and I went to move the diorama and, go and present it to my dad as a Christmas gift, the farmer fell over. So I tried gluing it again, and it still didn't stay. So I glued it as best I could. I carefully carried it up to him and handed it to him and told him, don't shake it because the miniature is probably going to fall over. And we had a good laugh about that. But that is all there is to this diorama. Like, it's a very simple one that I did actually really enjoy making. I did learn like a few lessons from it, and it was very much rushed. I think the major lesson to be learned here is about planning out your basing and not really flying by the seat of your pants on it like I did. I planned where I was going to put all the pieces, but I didn't work on making those areas like very flat for those pieces to sit on all that well. So I think next time I do a diorama that uses actual dirt, I'm going to plan it out better so that the terrain and characters will sit better on there and can actually be glued in place. But yeah, that's about it. Hope you're having a royal day or night, whatever it is for you, and I will talk to you next time after I show you some of the sexy shots of this little diorama.